Elias was a man who loved the sea. He believed its vastness held the answers to the questions his heart whispered in the quiet of the night. With his friends, he set sail on a small ship named the Wanderer. Their journey was filled with laughter and stories, the sun warming their faces and the wind guiding them toward the horizon. They were searching for adventure, for a sign that their lives were part of a grander story. Elias felt the universe was smiling upon them, each wave a gentle push forward, each star a friendly guide in the dark expanse of the sky. The world felt full of promise, and every moment was a treasure. But the ocean is a powerful master, and its moods can change without warning. One night, a storm appeared like a great beast rising from the depths. The sky turned black, and the waves grew into angry mountains of water that tossed the Wanderer as if it were a child's toy. Elias fought against the storm with all his strength, but the sea was stronger. It broke their ship apart, and in the chaos he was separated from his friends. He clung to a piece of wood, a tiny speck in the immense, roaring darkness, feeling the cold water steal his warmth and his hope. The universe that had smiled upon him now seemed to have forgotten him entirely. When the sun rose, its light found Elias lying on the soft sand of a small, unknown island. He was alone. The sea was calm again, as if the storm had been just a terrible dream. He searched the horizon for any sign of his friends or his ship, but there was only the endless blue meeting the endless sky. The silence of the island was profound, broken only by the gentle lapping of the waves and the cries of strange birds. He was a castaway, a single soul on a patch of earth, surrounded by an impassable sea. He had been given life, but he had lost everything else he held dear. In the days that followed, Elias learned the island's secrets. He found sweet fruits hanging from unfamiliar trees and discovered herbs that could soothe his hunger. He knew he had to survive not just for himself, but for the memory of his friends. He gathered branches and large leaves, and with great effort, he built a small hut. This simple structure became his home, his shelter from the sun and the rain. It was a fragile fortress against the loneliness that threatened to consume him. Each day he worked, and each day he watched the sea, praying for a ship to appear on the distant line where the water touched the heavens. As the sun set each evening, Elias would perform a sacred ritual. He would build a small fire on the beach, not just for warmth against the cool night air, but as a signal. The smoke that rose from the flames was a message sent to the world, a silent plea for rescue. He imagined the smoke carrying his hopes across the water, a thin grey finger pointing toward his lonely existence. He believed that if he kept the fire going, someone would eventually see it. It was his connection to the world he had lost, a testament to his will to live and his refusal to surrender to the vast emptiness that surrounded him. But the days bled into weeks, and the weeks felt like an eternity. The sun rose and set in a relentless, unchanging cycle. The island, which had first seemed like a sanctuary, began to feel like a prison. The same trees, the same fruits, the same endless horizon became symbols of his isolation. Despair began to creep into his heart like a slow poison. He would sit by his fire at night, watching the flames dance, and wonder if his signals were just disappearing into an uncaring sky. The hope that had burned so brightly within him began to flicker, threatening to die out completely, leaving him in total darkness. His prayers became quieter, his actions more mechanical. He gathered his food, maintained his hut, and lit his fire. But the passion was gone. He was simply going through the motions of survival, his spirit growing weary. The silence of the island was no longer peaceful. It was a heavy blanket that smothered his thoughts. He felt as if he were the last man on earth, forgotten by God and by humanity. The universe, he thought, had a plan for everyone. But perhaps it had simply lost his page. He was a story without an ending, a song without a final note, adrift in a world of profound solitude. The loneliness was a constant ache, a shadow that followed him even under the brightest sun. He would talk to himself, just to hear the sound of a human voice, but the echoes only reminded him of his solitude. He missed the easy laughter of his friends, The feeling of camaraderie, the simple act of sharing a meal. He had been so sure of his path, so confident in the signs he was following. Now he wondered if he had been mistaken all along. Perhaps there was no grand design, only chaos and chance, and he was just an unlucky soul caught in its indifferent web. His faith was a ship taking on water, slowly sinking into a sea of doubt. One night, as a fierce wind howled across the island, a stray spark from his signal fire leaped onto the dry roof of his hut. In an instant, the flames embraced the structure he had worked so hard to build. He watched in horror as his home, his only shelter, was consumed by a raging fire. The blaze grew larger and larger, illuminating the entire beach with a terrifying orange glow. Everything he had, the one small piece of the world he had managed to control, was turning into smoke and ash before his very eyes. The fire was not a signal of hope anymore. It was a funeral pyre for his last remaining shred of security and comfort. As the last wall of his hut collapsed into embers, a wave of pure, unadulterated anger washed over Elias. He fell to his knees on the sand, the heat of the fire on his face, and screamed at the dark sky. "Why? Have I not suffered enough? I have lost my friends, my ship, my life, and now you take this one small thing I'd built for myself?" He felt a profound sense of betrayal, as if the universe itself was personally tormenting him, finding cruel new ways to test his spirit until it finally broke completely. It was a cosmic joke, and he was the punchline. His questions echoed into the uncaring wind. He felt utterly defeated, a man who had fought a long, hard battle only to lose everything in the final moments. The fire that had been his beacon of hope had become the instrument of his deepest despair. There was nothing left to do, nowhere to go. He laid on the sand, exhausted and empty, watching the last of the embers die out, leaving him in a darkness that was deeper than any he had ever known before. All his faith, all his resilience had turned to ashes along with his humble home. He closed his eyes, no longer caring if he ever opened them again. Sleep did not come. He lay there for hours, a hollowed-out shell of a man feeling the cold sand beneath him. The fire was gone, and with it his will to continue. He had tried so hard to read the signs, to trust in the journey, but it had all led to this. A barren beach, a pile of smouldering ruins, and a heart full of sorrow. He concluded that there was no hidden meaning, no benevolent force guiding his steps. There was only the cruel hand of fate, and it had finally crushed him. He had sent his message of smoke to the heavens for weeks, and the only answer he received was destruction. As the first light of dawn painted the eastern sky with soft shades of pink and gold, Elias was awakened by a sound. It was a sound he had dreamed of, a sound he no longer believed he would ever hear again, the low, steady hum of a ship's engine. He sat up, his heart pounding in his chest, and looked out at the ocean. There on the horizon was a ship. It was not a mirage, not a figment of his exhausted imagination. It was real, and it was heading directly toward his island. A small boat was being lowered from its side, moving purposefully toward the shore. The sailors who reached him were surprised to find him alive. The captain explained, "We saw the smoke signal last night. It was the largest fire we have ever seen at sea. We thought a ship was in serious trouble, so we changed our course immediately to investigate." Elias stood there, speechless, the captain's words washing over him like a gentle wave. He looked at the smoking black ruins of his hut, the very symbol of his deepest despair. That fire, the one he believed was his final curse, had actually been his salvation. It was not the small, hopeful signals he had sent for weeks, but the giant blaze of his loss that had guided them to him. On the journey home, wrapped in a warm blanket with a cup of hot tea in his hands, Elias finally understood. He had thought the universe was cruel, that his suffering was meaningless. But he was wrong. Sometimes the path to our greatest blessings is paved with what appears to be our greatest misfortunes. The loss of his hut was not a punishment. It was a necessary event, a painful but essential part of the plan to bring him home. His faith had been tested not to break him, but to show him that even in the ashes of his world, a greater purpose was at work. unseen and unheard. When Elias finally stepped back onto the soil of his homeland, he was a different man. He had lost his ship and his friends, but he had found something profound in the solitude of the island. He had found a deeper understanding of faith. It was not about believing that bad things will never happen. It was about trusting that even when they do, they might be leading you to a destination you could never have reached on your own. He looked up at the sky, no longer with anger or questions, but with a heart full of gratitude for the mysterious and beautiful journey of life, and for the fire that had to burn everything down to light his way home.